All right, I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Jamstream layout and sort of kick things off here and overview what we're going to be doing today. All right. The Jamstream layout's a bit more simple than some of the other ones that I've used for the streams here on YouTube, since all you really need is just a basic background and myself here. But something I alluded to in the debut stream, as far as this type of content, the point of the jam streams is primarily to, one, serve as a good spot for practice. If you're tuning into the stream for the first time today, first time seeing my content before, one of the things that I'm really into is beatboxing. And on these dedicated jam streams, I want to take some time to go through practice drills, since there's never such thing as too much practice. And then also experimenting around with ideas for routines, patterns, routines, and other things. And one thing I mentioned on the debut stream that I want to focus on, probably for the last section of the jam stream today, would be the idea of a collaborative brainstorming session with you guys in the chat for coming up with new ideas on stream background music. To sort of explain for folks who might not know what I'm talking about, on my basic background music tracks or track that I use for certain types of streams, I haven't done it recently because we've been doing music, but for chatting streams or other non-music related ones, I have a real simple background track that I created that's a beatboxing track. And I think it'd be really fun going forward if, as part of these jam sessions, we sort of brainstorm collectively ideas on new tracks to put into the mix, so that when we're doing chatting streams or chill streams or whatnot and we have background music going on, it's running through a playlist of stuff that we collaboratively have created. And so I've got some ideas on how I want to approach that. We'll make that the focus of the later part of the stream. But for the initial section, I've sort of mentally mapped out a schedule of things I want to do. I'd like to work for a while on some basic drills, and to sort of back up and talk about some things that I mentioned on the debut stream when we had our mini jam session. One thing that's kind of neat about beatboxing as a hobby and an art form is that it's very grindy, if I can describe it that way. A lot of the techniques and things that you're going to learn or develop as a beatboxer require a lot of practice. I think on the stream I said something like the composition of practice to concept when it comes to learning techniques, in my opinion, is like 90% and 10%. It's 90% practice and it's 10% knowing how the technique works. Once you know mechanically how it works, it's just practicing it over and over again to develop speed, consistency, and to get technique sounding clean. So as a result, at least to me, beatboxing is pretty easy to grind when you're just kind of going about your daily business, assuming you're not out in public or you're going to be a disturbance to people. If you know that you want to practice certain sounds and you just have a free minute to yourself, you can sit there and go, okay, well, I'm not doing anything physically at the moment. I can sit here and just practice my kicks and snares, and just, while you're sitting there making a sandwich for lunch, just going or any sort of patterns or technique you can just practice. It's really easy. You don't have to go to an assigned practice space. You don't have to set up equipment or an instrument or anything like that. So in that regard, it's easy to practice. The tricky part comes with being diligent and forcing yourself to practice routinely. One of the beatboxers that I do follow, he said the whole concept of perfect practice doesn't necessarily apply to beatboxing because you might sort of get into a robotic habit of practicing, but it won't further your technique or build skills. It'll be sort of like treading water. And I think that's true. It's good to practice the same techniques and basics that you know for the sake of consistency and cleanliness and speed. But if you want to get better and grow and level up, then you do have to sort of push yourself to step outside your comfort zone and practice techniques or sounds or things that maybe you aren't comfortable doing or don't know as well. And I don't think I'll be able to show it here. But one thing that this guy recommended, which I think is a really good idea, and maybe I'll find a way to put this into some sort of viewable format for you guys that are tuning in, but there's this idea that because brains are not perfect data storage tools, it's really easy to forget everything you learn and know. If you build out a huge repertoire of sounds and other things in beatboxing that you know, at the heat of the moment, like if someone asks you to freestyle and they say, hey, bust out a beat right now, show us something really cool, and you're on the spot, and your brain sort of goes into reaction mode, you might not remember. I know, hypothetically, I know 500 sounds. Let's pick 500, something out of the 500 sounds, put together a routine and impress people. That's difficult because, again, if you're put on the spot, you might not be able to react that fast. So one thing this guy recommended is that you create a list, some sort of repository that's going to be your master list of everything you know. And this particular beatboxer I talked to, he had a huge notepad. And it was a notepad full of just sounds, patterns, all sorts of stuff that made sense to him. So if he was practicing and said, okay, what do I want to work on today? Do I want to work on basses? Do I want to work on technicality patterns? And as we sort of go through basic drills and just sort of practice here, I'll take a minute to sort of explain what a lot of this stuff means. That way, if people are watching the stream archives later and they're just curious about learning about beatboxing, they can sort of get caught up on the terminology and it'll make sense. So this list idea is basically your A to Z, everything that you as a beatboxer know, and you can pull it up and refer to it when you're practicing or whatever and say, okay, I haven't worked on this particular sound. Like, let's say I've been doing nothing but PF snare drills for the last couple practice sessions I've been doing. Just nothing but PF snares all day long. Been practicing nothing but that. I've been neglecting my outwards K snares. But look at the list and say, hey, that just reminds me, I haven't done anything with outward Ks in a while, so I'm going to practice that for a bit today. So instead of your PFs, your an outwards K sounds like a hard K sound. So you say, okay, I'm going to drill Ks, just hard outwards K pattern drills all day. Just like, and likewise for anything else you might have in your master list of all your sounds, your encyclopedia of beatbox sounds. If you have a list that you can go to and refer to at any point, you can just immediately tell yourself, all right, here's one that I'm going to do. So what I've done, and again, I didn't think of how I would show this on stream. I'll probably give it some thought and I'll figure something out later. We won't waste time with that today. But I created an Excel document. I've worked with Excel a decent amount when it comes to managing information. So for me, it was easy to just put together a big spreadsheet with tabs for the different types of sounds and put together a master list. Here's everything that I've learned. Here's everything that I feel like I know well. And then because I'm kind of meticulous like that, I coded them with a status. So let's just say it's a brand new sound that I'm learning and I don't feel like I'm good at it yet. That I coded as learning. If it's a sound that I've learned, but I'm still mastering, so I know how it works, I can do it, but it's not clean, I might call it practicing as the status. And if it's something that I feel like I know really well, I could do all day long in my sleep, then I'll put mastered or something like that. And so sometimes when I'm sitting down for a practice session or whatnot, I'll pull up that spreadsheet and take a look at everything that I've got if I want to figure out what I want to practice. Or likewise, if I come up with something new, let's just say I come up with a new pattern or a new sound or something, or I start learning a new sound, add it to the list and give it the appropriate status. It says, okay, don't forget that you came up with this. Put it here, put notation as far as how you do it. Something like, let's just say I come up with a technicality pattern and I don't want to lose it. So I put down the notation for how it sounds, put it on the spreadsheet, save it. And then 3 weeks from now, if I pull it up again and say, oh, what was that one pattern that I was thinking of? Oh, there it is on the spreadsheet. It's there. So that was a really handy tool or tip. And I think for people that are learning, finding a way to keep all that information together would be a good idea. Make it easier for you to keep track of stuff. I guess what we can do, sort of start off, like I mentioned previously, a good focus for this first part, one, because I need the practice, and two, because it's just a good way to sort of start off these jam sessions, is working on basic drills. And I'm going to sort of approach this as a semi-tutorial type thing. Again, I'm not a beatbox teacher. I wouldn't claim to be. I haven't been doing it for that long. But to give people context that may be watching this later, on the debut stream, we talked a little bit about basics. In fact, we talked a lot about basics. And when it comes to putting together your drum kit and your tools, at its core, if you think of like a drum kit, for beatboxing, you have a core set of basic sounds that are fundamental and are part of pretty much every rhythm or beat you might make. So I'm going to go over that again real quick, and I probably won't do this every single stream. I'm going to do it here since this is the first official jam stream. But in the future, I may point back to the discussion here to give people a reference point as far as, all right, if you want to hear the quick overview of basics, go check out jam stream number 1 or what have you. But to recap, if you look at it like a drum set when it comes to beatboxing, the most basic and I would consider keystone sound that everyone should learn and then practice forever for the rest of the time as long as you're going to be beatboxing is your kicks. And so, like so many people have explained in the past, a kick is just a B sound without the E or the vocalization. So if you break down mechanically what a B sound is, it's pressure from your lips. So you end up with a B, and you take away the E, it becomes B. It's not a pop. I did by accident. A B sound, just a B. And then you take away any sort of vocalization and it becomes B. And the ability to get kicks clean is just practice. Anyone can do a B. And the more you practice it, the more precise and clean you get it, just like any other sound. So they always say boots and cats, right? Your kicks. And so doing drill patterns for kicks can be done a couple different ways. Like I mentioned on the debut stream, if you're doing steady beats with just quarter notes, you're on a 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where everyone starts. Just keeping a basic tempo. I need to get a metronome. Maybe I'll do that for next time. But keeping time, just and doing that until you're comfortable and the sound is clean is where everybody starts. Some people may jump into the really sort of fancy stuff initially, but I think if you're going to start ground up from beatboxing with no background or any experience, just keep it simple and build your comfort level with the basic stuff. And then as you get more familiar, you sort of mix it up a little bit. So if we were focusing on kick drills, and I'm trying to think of the best way to do it. Let me do an overview of the basic sounds that we're going to be focusing on for a lot of the drills, and then I'll actually go do the drills themselves, and then that's what I'll just do for a while. That way I'm not jumping back and forth. So kick drills, again, that's the first basic sound. Your second basic sound, in my opinion, and I've never talked to another beatboxer on whether or not people feel differently, would be your hi-hats. So on a typical hi-hat, it's just a TS sound normally, or a T sound, depending on what kind of sound you want. A T sound would just be a TS sound would be a So for hi-hat drills, it functions a lot like the kick drills in that you're doing the same repeated sound over and over again, but obviously the speed and precision is a little different. Hey, what's up, Edward? Welcome to the stream. As always, good to see you. Since you're the first one, at least to talk here, please give me feedback on the mic. I've got the gain up a little bit, and I'm not eating it like I was on the debut stream. I'm a little bit further back. So let me know if it's coming in clearly or if the sounds that I make are blowing out the mic or peaking it. I want to get that dialed in beginning so that if people are jumping in and out, they're not coming into really bad sound. But to go back to the idea of hi-hat drills, I think it's good to focus on the T, the short hi-hat, since that's what you'll be using probably more often than the tss. So that one tends to be a little bit more rapid. Okay, thanks, man. Let me know if anything gets weird with the sound going forward. So basic hi-hat drills will probably be something like and it's just that over and over again. And if you want to work on your ability to move between different hi-hat sounds, you might mix in a TS or a tss, so it would sound something like or even you can alternate the rhythm with something like and it's that over and over and over and over again until you get the precision and the ability to do it really quickly. So I'll probably mix in a little bit of those drills along with the kick ones. In case you missed the beginning, Edward, what we're doing right now is I'm just giving a quick overview of the basic sound kit, kind of like we talked about on the debut. I talked about kicks, I talked about hats, I'm going to talk a little bit about snares, and then I'm going to go and then work on some repetitive drills. We'll see how long as people kind of come and go, but for the beginning, I want to do a focus on basic sounds, so I'll be working on drills and patterns for those 3 basic sounds to start. And hopefully my feet don't get tired. Unlike the debut stream where I was sitting down for the whole thing, because it's easier for me to breathe standing up, I'm actually standing at my desk with my entire VTuber stream set up. So hopefully my legs and my feet don't get tired from doing this for a couple hours or whatever. But it is easier for me to breathe when I'm doing this. So if we move on to the overview of basic sounds, and we look at the third sound in the basic kit, the snare. And we talked a little bit about it on the debut stream, but the snare is probably the one where you're going to see the most variation of the 3 core basic sounds, in my opinion. The different techniques and types of snares that people employ is pretty varied. So I want to talk a little bit about the ones that I know, and then when it comes to drills, I'll have to think about how I want to do the actual practice portion. So real quickly, the first and one of the most simple to learn, I think, for snares would be the PF snare. And like we talked about before, the PF snare is just a P sound, a P sound, and a F sound at the same time, or back to back, so close together, they're essentially one sound. So you take the P and the F together, you get P. And PF snare is pretty handy because you can do it without a lot of air, and you can do it quickly, and it's really versatile. And the practice for that one is just repetition to get it clean. I mentioned K snares earlier. The outward K, which was the first K snare that I learned, I think sort of by accident, really. I didn't realize that's what it was called until a little bit later when I looked it up. But the K snare is created by creating a seal with your tongue and forcing air outwards. It's kind of hard to describe, and I'm not really going to get into the mechanics of how to teach sounds here, but it's the opposite of an inward K, which I'll talk about just in a minute. But for a K sound, it sounds like the letter K without the vocalization, but a lot harder and a lot more direct. So an outwards K, for the way I do them, sounds like, and that one is good because it is not a breathing sound. It's made using the pressure in your mouth, forcing the air outwards, so you don't have to worry about breathing in or breathing out. And it's pretty handy and fits into beats pretty well. And its opposite cousin, the inward K, is done the same way, but it's inwards. And I mentioned on the debut stream that the inwards K tends to be one of the most challenging beginner sounds for people to learn because the mechanics of it are a little bit weird. To really quickly summarize how it works, you're creating a seal with your tongue in your mouth against the roof of your mouth, and then you're inhaling and then popping the back of your tongue down to create a sort of suction that is creating the K sound itself. So an inwards K sounds like, and it's very difficult to explain mechanics if you can't physically see a human mouth. So I always tell people there's a lot of really good tutorials explaining how to do that sound in a bunch of different ways. It's just figuring out the movement until you get it to actually work, and then it's practicing it to get it clean. Because when you first do inward Ks, they tend to be a little bit more breathy. When I first started, mine sounded more like, it was not as short, not as poppy, as it were. And that's just practice. Over time, it goes from kind of a to the more quick. And I feel like once people can sort of figure that out, it opens up a lot of a variation for patterns and things you can do with your sounds. Another snare connected to the inwards K is called the rim shot. The rim shot is the same motion with that tongue seal and sort of vacuum, except you're not breathing in, you're just using the pressure in your mouth. And I'll say right now, it took me forever to learn how to do a rim shot properly. In fact, I did it by accident after probably a year and a half in. But a rim shot sounds similar to an inwards K, but it's a little bit faster. So rim shot sounds like, it's not quite as punchy as the inwards K because it's not using any air. It's just using suction in your mouth to get that pop. But as a result, it works really well for technicality patterns, which we'll talk about later on in the practice session. I won't get into technicality right now, but even watching probably 5 different rim shot videos and how they explain it, I just had to trial and error that one. Some people can pick it up right away, and that's good. But for me, it took me forever to figure out what they were asking me to do, and then once I got it, it was fine. But for snares, a couple more. I talked a little bit about the BMG or spit snare before. That's the sounds like a clap. The BMG or spit snare is done by forcing air from between your lips and they're pressed tightly together and then cutting it off in a burst. I recommend that people check out tutorials for that one since it's a little bit weird to learn. But real quickly, if you put your lips together tightly and then force air out, you get the kind of that like baby crackling noise. So if you get in the habit of clamping down and cutting the sound off right as you push the air through, that's how you get the. And over time, as you practice it, then it gets cleaner. It's a really versatile sound because it doesn't require you to breathe like the other ones, and it fits into beats really well. I like the BMG. It's one of my favorites. And then, let's see. The last snare, which one I don't do often, I need to practice more, is what's called a cough snare. And the cough snare sounds like, and that one has a kind of different hit sound than the others, which is why it's neat. I need to do it more because mine isn't very clean. But if we were to put it into a beat real quick, since I didn't talk about this one last time, if you put a cough snare into a beat, it would sound like something like. And that one's done by forcing the air out from your throat like you're coughing. You're not doing like a cough. It's more of a without the voice. And then you're breathing out through your mouth at the same time. So it's like a ha. That's what the mechanical motions sound like for a cough snare. So when you get the ha, but without the voice, and you put them together, that's how you get the. And once you get really clean with it, it gets sort of a reverb effect on it, which I'm not good at. I don't do cough snares a ton. But when you get really good at it, it sounds clean. So that's one I should probably make a point to practice more. It just hasn't really fit in with the patterns I've done, which is why I don't do it a lot. But that's a good one. But I think that'll sort of do it for the main snares. There's a couple different variations on some. There's something, I think it's called a punch snare, with the psh, psh, or a PSH. That's probably what that's called. It sounds like an old cartoon sound effect of psh, 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 psh. That's a very old school sound that way back in the 80s when beatboxing was invented, people used to do. But that's another one. There's sort of a tongue-rolled, punchy snare, a I don't know if that one has an official notation, but I have heard that one too. But I think that'll do it for the main ones. And so before we get into the actual drills for the basic kit sounds, later on, the way I want to break this down is sort of in three sections. I want to do basic drills for a bit, so your kicks with hats and snares. Then I want to do a section on technicality. What I'll do is when we move to that part of the stream, I'll talk a little bit about what technicality is, what it means, and what it means to practice. And then the third part of the quote-unquote drills and basics will be basses. And hopefully my voice survives that long. Last time we did our jam stream on the debut session after like 2 hours, and my voice is really suffering, so it was affecting how clean my basses were coming out. But we'll see how it goes here. If I'm spending a lot of time doing drills and not necessarily talking, then I'll save my voice a bit, but it should be fine. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, at the end, I want to come up with some ideas for new background tracks that we can use on the stream. So let's go ahead and kick off drills. The way I plan to do this is to just sort of repeatedly cycle through some patterns for practicing the sounds that I use. And then I'll do that for a little bit and then switch to another one and switch to another one and maybe go back and then start mixing up the patterns and sort of keep it focused. So I will do that. And as people come and go or people ask questions, by all means, like I said before, if anybody watching has questions on anything I'm doing or anything we're talking about, just drop them and then we can stop and talk. So I'm not going to be ignoring the chat. The chat's right here on my other monitor. So we'll start off with kick drills. So we talked about the simple 4/4, just I'm going to go a little bit faster and work on double and triples, just because that's what I feel like I need to build most accuracy on. So I'm going to start off with a series of kicks, and then I'll mix other sounds in before we switch up the drill types. So let's see, how do I want to do this? Oh, and also, please keep giving me feedback on the mic levels and everything else as I'm doing these. I think we're good for now, but if it starts peaking because of the certain sounds I'm doing, just let me know and I can fix things. Let's see. Let's try triple kicks. So that would be your BTB. I think what I'll do is I will mix in my hats and my basic PF snares for the kick drills. We'll sort of do a combination. That way I'm not having to go back and sort of do the whole thing over again. So I may sort of mix up the hat sounds in between the kicks and snares. So we'll just sort of see. So let's see. We've got basic kicks, triple kicks. Let's see. I'm trying to think of a good pattern for practicing. We could do something a little bit more constant. I guess we're now doing dubstep, I guess. It's like a dubstep beat. Oh boy, I'm definitely glad I'm standing up for this. All right. I think what I'd like to do is mix up my snares and keep working on the same kick and hat patterns for the drills. So what I'll do is I may do it on the fly as I'm sort of mixing things up, but I'll probably switch back and forth between PF and Ks and maybe BMGs. So we'll sort of see how it goes. But if we go back to our basic sort of electronic rhythm, the do something like that. We could switch it up with the I guess I could try speeding up the tempo to sort of practice a little bit more high speed with the outwards K. So let's try that and see how that works. So if we were to pick up the pace a little bit, we get something like now we switch. Oof. What I did there is I switched between the outwards and inwards K, just sort of mid pattern to give myself kind of an opportunity to breathe. Since of the inward sounds, the inwards K makes it the easiest to take air in. And as a result, it's good to mix that up in beats just to give your lungs a break. We can continue working on some basic pattern drills. For some reason, my voice is getting raspy, and I don't know why. I'm not really doing a ton of talking, and I'm not doing any bass work. Let's see. We could work on some stuff with our spit snares, our BMGs. We start off slow with a One thing I didn't mention about the BMG has to do with what I call BMG snare runs. So because it's using air outwards, it's a little bit difficult to do it in rapid succession. You can, and you kind of do a rapid up. But if you wanted to do a really consecutive series of BMGs, one way that I figured out how to do that, and I don't think I invented the technique by any means, is using your tongue to cut off the airflow real quickly as you're doing the actual snares, kind of like you would if you were playing a brass instrument or even a woodwind instrument. So what that sounds like, if you're trying to do it real quickly, would be a, and it's just essentially a stream of air, but instead of cutting it off on each snare, you're using your tongue to sort of interrupt your airflow, and sort of like a rapid pecking motion or a rapid triple 16th note tonguing. I think that's what would be in music. So that's how you get the, and you can do something like adding or lowering pressure on your lips to get the sound to go up or down. So you go, that's fun. I've put that into patterns every once in a while. It's a good way to sort of mix up things with that particular snare. So for basic drills, I'm trying to keep tabs on how long we're spending on each section. I think we can go ahead and move on to the next thing I wanted to talk about for the jam stream today when it comes to practicing stuff. And that's the idea of technicality. And technicality in beatboxing is somewhat unique, but basically it comes down to patterns of sounds that are worked into fast beats. You can kind of think of it sort of like a drum fill on a set, sort of a series of sounds put together in between other sounds or in between other parts of the beat. And the reason why you want to practice things like your hats, your T's, and even your K's would be so you can be accurate and quick with them on demand and be able to string them together into patterns. So what that sounds like in a beat, if we were to think of the basic beat, something like a snare, hat, PF snare, basic beat would be something like a technicality pattern would be adding in more sounds in between those basic beats to switch up and add variation to the overall pattern. So if we were to do, let's say we did a TKP, which is my favorite series of technicality sounds, it would sound like so the technicality pattern in that set there is the TKP, and that's just the three sounds in one triplet set. So when you're practicing it, you're learning a or my P and B sounds in that one sort of blend together, and it's like they're sort of interchangeable. When you first are doing it, it sounds just like, and as you practice it and your mouth gets muscle memory and consistency, your ability to do it faster is what levels up, and that's what the whole idea of technicality focuses on. So what that sounds like is at slow speeds you get a, and then I'm just going to speed it up it's as fast as I can go. So it goes, and that really fast, rapid series of sounds is just that set of individual sounds done very fast. And that's just practice. So for the practice beats, let's see, what would be the best way to sort of explain that? I guess we could do something like switch. Real quick, there's something I forgot to do on my OBS setup here. I want to put a little header on the Jamstream template that shows what we're doing. And if I don't do that, then people tuning in will have no idea what point of the stream we're on. So we'll keep it on basics and drills for now. So going back to the idea of technicality, like I said, the one that I've learned first and the one I use the most is the TKP. But I also started working on an inverse pattern of that. So it's KPT. So essentially backwards. So the TKP sounds like the KTP sounds like. And I started doing it with an actual ko instead of a k. So and so it sounds a little bit similar, but because the sounds are in a different order, then when it hits your ear, it hits a little bit different, as they say. So I found that I think I can do the KPT a little bit faster than the TKP. I should probably practice both, or going from one to the other. But if we look at the KPT in a pattern, it would be something like and so that one tends to be a good filler and it's somewhat interchangeable. One pattern that I was trying to figure out, I haven't really figured it out yet, but if I went TKP, KPT, so that's one that I want to do as the next major pattern in technicality. And I'll have to practice that one a bit more. One thing that's been pointed out by people who teach beatboxing is when you're coming up with technicality patterns, you never do them fast, straight out the gate. Most people, if it's a new pattern and your mouth isn't used to the combination of sounds, you can't do it quickly. So you have to go back and sort of practice it really slowly first, and then as you get familiar with it, it speeds up. So for this TKP KPT thing I'm talking about, what I'm going to have to practice, and I won't spend a lot of time on it here on stream, but what I'm going to have to do is learn how to do the and really practice on getting it clean slowly. And then once my mouth has the muscle memory to do those six sounds in a row, it will get faster. So I'm going to put that on the list of things to practice probably after the stream. And then as we sort of proceed on these sessions, we'll see how it develops. But for, let's see, other technicality, the one I should probably talk about that is not one of my main sounds that I use a lot, but it's probably the most famous technicality set, is the TKK. And that one sounds like, and the first sound is just a just hat. The second sound is a k sound. It's a K, a k sound, but it's not a forced outwards K or an inward K. It's just a k. And then the last K, or big K, is the rim shot, the that I mentioned. And that's probably the most common speed pattern that people learn. Because I didn't learn the rim shot right away, I didn't pick up TKK for a while, and mine is not good. It's not fast. But when you do TKKs, it sounds like, and as you get faster with it and you get cleaner with it, your ability to string more and more of them back to back gets better. And that one is literally just practice and muscle memory like all the others. But I kind of mix in that one with all the other ones I practice. I want to get better because it's really versatile. You can use it in a lot of high-speed patterns and beats. So that one I also have on my list as a work in progress. When I first started doing it, I couldn't do it very quickly at all. I could only kind of go, and that's how I learn. And just practicing over and over again. The fastest I can go with it right now is I can do like maybe 3 of them before my mouth resets. So that one will be more of a work in progress too. But for technicality practicing drills, let's see, we sort of did a mix with the TKPs and the KPTs. I think I'm going to do a couple random, just freestyle beats to practice several different ones, and then maybe we can move on to talking about basses. Real quick, another one, I guess it's considered a technicality pattern. I guess I should talk a little bit about drags. And drags are a beatbox technique that requires you to breathe in air sort of in between beats. And when you hear people breathing in a lot, they're usually doing drags it sounds like it's integrated into the rhythm. So what that means would be like an inward drag sounds like, I know it doesn't sound like much. It's basically just your tongue on the roof of your mouth and you're bringing air in. And you're sort of doing, the way I've heard it explains, like a ha-fa sound in. But what it sounds like in between beats would be something like a. And what that allows you to do when you get good at it is mix in a sound that is also allowing you to get more air into your lungs without having to stop and breathe in like that. And inward drags are really useful, and they're really versatile, just like all the other sounds. So I always recommend just the basic inward drag, just finding ways to work it in to get in the habit of sort of exhale versus inhale. But the reason why I wanted to mention it is because there's a technicality pattern that I do, which again, I don't think I invented it. It's just one I use a lot. Involves the use of a technique called the sucker punch. And the sucker punch is connected to the inward drag because the mouth position is very similar. But the way it works is you inhale, but you take your tongue and you seal it completely to the roof of your mouth and cut the airflow off completely. So not like a K where you're going and air's going past. The sucker punch, it's literally just it sounds like that sort of suction and stop. And the way the mechanics of the sound work is it's like you're saying hut, but inwards. So that's how you get the, and it's got this real kind of punchy sound that sounds pretty good on a mic. But the technicality pattern that I do, I call it a sucker punch drag because it's a sequence of inward sounds that uses the sucker punch. And you probably heard me do it on just freestyle stuff, especially on the debut stream. But the sucker punch drag takes a, and then a, let's see. It's like a sip sound with your tongue, like almost like a fip, but inwards, and you're sealing your lips shut. So you get a, and it's essentially that twice after one sucker punch. So the sucker punch drag that I call it, and if I ever find out if it's got a official name, I'll make sure and update it. But that sounds like 3 quick sounds in succession, starting with the sucker punch. But it works really good in conjunction with other inward sounds like the inwards K. And so what that sounds like in practice, we'll just run through it a couple times, would be something like a, and it gives you that real quick sort of triplets in succession, and it also allows you to take air in, which is really good for regulating how much air you're working with on beats. And you can even extend it out. I guess it'd be a triplet. So instead of it'd be 4 instead of 3. Yeah, I've done that variation too. It sort of depends on the tempo of the beat. But that might sound something like more like a dubstep beat. Something like that. I think I lost the stream for a second here. We should be back now. Let's see. Are we good? That was weird. I clicked on the wrong button and jumped out of the window. I need to be careful not to do that. Okay, so getting back to the practice runs for technicality patterns. We talked about the twin triplet patterns, the TKP and KPT. Okay, thanks, Edward. It looks like, hopefully it didn't drop. I guess just jumping over to another window caused me to lose the actual stream status page here on YouTube. But looking at OBS, we're still we're still up. So that's fine. Okay, now I see you on the list here. I wonder why it didn't show you listed there before. That's strange. But going back to an overview of technicality, let me think if I want to go over anything else. The twin triplet patterns are ones I use a lot. The sucker punch drag series of sounds, again, those are other ones I use a lot. I guess we can move on to basses. What I want to do real quick is take a couple minute break. I'm going to switch back to the loading screen for just a sec, and I'm going to go grab some more water. I've been going through water like a maniac. And then we'll jump back, and then we'll do some bass practice and talk about that a little bit, and then we'll kind of proceed from there. So real quick, we're going to go to the loading screen, and then I will be back shortly. A couple minutes. All right. I am back. Let's jump back to the jam stream template. All right. We're back again. One thing I went and grabbed, in addition to getting another bottle of water here, is something that I heard suggested from another beatboxer that I follow. This dude from the States named Kindo. He's a professional beatboxer, and he's pretty well known in the scene, and he's extremely talented. He does a lot of tutorials, and he's usually one of the first people I point folks to that are looking to learn. But he had a recommendation when it comes to prolonged beatbox sessions, especially as your voice starts to get worn out and tired. And I need to do this on just live streams in general, especially where I talk a lot. My voice starts to go after about, an hour and a half. But he recommended eating a spoonful of honey. And I know that sounds kind of weird to most people, but the way it works is honey coats your throat and it sort of numbs it a little bit, and it reduces the wear on your throat. So if you're doing a lot of really strenuous sounds, or even just talking and your throat gets sore and kind of worn out, if you eat a spoonful of honey and give it a minute, then it will allow you to keep going, and it'll sort of protect your voice and keep it from dying completely. So when I went to go grab water, that's what I did. I grabbed some honey out of the cupboard and just ate a little bit. And right away I could tell that my throat isn't feeling as ragged as it was when we were wrapping up the first part. So we'll see how long that lasts. Because we're going to be talking a little bit about basses, I wanted to make sure my voice wasn't just going to completely give out on me. So to sort of kick things off, I'm going to recap a little bit of what I talked about on the debut stream when it comes to basses. And practicing basses is going to be a little bit different than practicing the other basic sounds we talked about, because it's going to be a bit more involved. So before we get into the vocal chord related basses, I'll talk a little bit about some of the other ones. So I talk a little bit about what they call lip bass or lip oscillations. And what that is this sound here. And it's pretty common in beatboxing, and sort of goes way back to the origins and old school era. But the way you do lip oscillations... Yeah, exactly, Edward. I've heard that singers use the same thing, and voiceover VAs, they use the same thing for long sessions in the booth. And it works the same way for beatboxers. And I need to make a habit of having some honey on hand when I'm doing these stream sessions and I'm talking a lot. But to go back to the idea of lip oscillations, the way you do those is a really just modified horse lips. And horse lips, like everyone probably did as a kid, is when you just blow air out of your lips and let them flap. So what that sounds like normally is just a, you come home from a long day of work or whatever, and you're like, man, I'm tired. And you're just like, real loose flapping noise. And that's what that sounds like. Lip oscillations take that idea and add a couple tweaks to change the sound. So when you do your lips are just flapping away. But if you tighten up the corners of your mouth and you focus the sound further in and keep the corners of your lips tight instead of a, that's how you get the. So again, it's, you're tightening up your lips and you're getting a higher velocity or oscillation of sound, and that's how you go from to. And by either tightening or loosening your lips when you're doing the oscillations, you change the pitch. So what that sounds like would be, you get a little bit of range as far as the way the sound comes out. Not a ton, but if you're trying to create a certain pitch, then all you have to do is relax or tighten your lips or open or close your jaw and your mouth, inside of your mouth. The more sound has to resonate, the more sort of low sound you're going to get. But the neat thing about lip oscillations is because it's just a breathing sound, you can also vocalize it. So you can use your voice to sort of hum, just like a at the same time as the oscillation itself. So when you put the two together, you get. And that's sort of supplements the general sound, because you could do beats with just the unvocalized lip oscillations. You get something like. But if you add in the vocals, you get sort of a way to play around with the melodies. So you might get something like. And so lip oscillations are pretty versatile in that you can do crazy things like harmonize and sort of pair the different sounds, or you can use them sort of standalone. Overall, really, really versatile type of bass. It's, it might have been the first quote unquote actual bass that I ever learned. But if we focus on the lip bass sounds, I did want to talk a little bit about one of the most popular types of sounds in beatboxing in the new school era, probably going back at least, I want to say 5 to 8 years. I'd have to go and look and see when it was really sort of adopted and picked up. But that's the technique called a lip roll. And lip rolls are one of the most technically complicated sounds to learn because they're very unusual. But as a result, they tend to be relatively popular. You'll see most beatboxers incorporate lip rolls into their repertoire sounds in some fashion. So what that sounds like, and I'll do my best to sort of explain how it works, but if anyone is trying to learn lip rolls, go look up tutorials and watch people explain how they work, because it's a really complicated, weird sound. So a basic or dry lip roll is inwards. It's an inward sound, but it uses mouth pressure, not breath. So I know that sounds kind of confusing, but a regular dry lip roll sounds like. Sounds, I don't know how to describe what that sounds like. It sounds sort of like a synth warble almost, but it's really handy for mixing up into beats because it sounds different from most of the other ones. So if you're putting a basic lip roll into a beat, it might sound like. And it's overall a really versatile and useful sound to learn. And it took me, I'm not going to lie, it took me over a year to correctly figure out how to do the basic lip roll. And it took talking to some actual professional beatboxers and hearing how they sort of broke the sound down till I got it. But real quick, just to sort of explain how I figured it out. Again, anyone trying to learn lip rolls, go look at tutorials and look at every single one you can find and figure out how to make it work for you, because it was one of the most difficult sounds just for me to learn, but that doesn't mean someone else might not get it in a week. Just depends. But if you look at the corner of your mouth, and you have to pick a side, it comes from the corner, either left or right. I do mine on the left. And if you go and create a kissy noise from the corner of your mouth, so what that sounds like if you're doing it from the middle would be like a that sort of sound, but you focus it on the corner. So instead of sounding like that kind of kissy noise, it sounds more like a that sort of pucker inwards noise that you're just making with your lips. And what you do is you focus that sort of inward suction motion on that corner, and you practice that till your lips get strength to do it, because it's a very irregular motion that normal people when they talk don't do. And as you do it, you learn how to sort of pull harder, and then you drop your jaw down to the side a little bit to give yourself more of an opening. Again, you can't see a physical human mouth. It's very difficult to explain. But the sound evolves as you gain lip strength, and you go from the and you get that in-between sound. Sounds kind of like a synth, almost like a synth line. And the more you practice it, it goes from that and it drops down. So it goes from and that's how you get the actual lip roll. It's a very hard to describe sound, but I recommend looking up tutorials, and then that's how I figured it out. But we're talking about basses. The lip roll can be used as like a bass because, again, it sounds like it's kind of synthy and it's got that bass sound. But the one that really comes into play is the inwards lip roll, which is technically it's an evolution of the basic one, but I learned them in the reverse order. I learned how to do an inwards lip roll first, and then I learned the basic dry one after. And so the inwards one sounds like this. It's got a punch at the beginning, and then it drops down like a low, almost like an 808 bass. So again, that one sounds like, I do mine a little bit high by default, but if you keep your tongue out of the way and just let it drop, it sounds more like. And the way that one works is first you create a kick noise inwards, which is kind of hard to describe, but it's kind of a variation on that whole kissing sound. So if you go, basically keep your lips closed and then breathe in, you get the same kick noise. That's how you get the. It's that plus the lip roll motion, but you're breathing in instead of just using mouth pressure to get that. You're breathing in all the way, and you're letting that sound reverberate or resonate with your lip in the corner of your mouth as the air is going in, and that's how you get the. And just like the other one, again, I'm not trying to teach things officially here because it's, again, difficult to describe, but look up inwards lip roll tutorials to see how people's mouth position works. But basically, if you can learn the dry lip roll, and get good at that, the inwards one is just breathing in with that same motion and getting that punch at the beginning. So you add the inward kick, and then you breathe in for the basic lip roll, and then you sustain it, and it goes all the way in. That's how you get the. And the inwards lip roll is probably one of my favorite sounds, probably in the top 5 at least for ones that I know. But it's super handy for working into beats, especially when you're looking at drops or kind of more dubstepish sounds. So if we were to use it in practice, inwards lip roll, we get something like something like that. And then once you know how to do the inwards lip roll motion, you can play around with the positioning and tightness of lips and your mouth position to change the way the sound works. So like I said before, I tend to do mine a little higher by default, and that's done by raising the tongue up to create sort of a whistle, kind of like a cat would make. And you combine that with the inwards lip roll motion, and that's how you get. And if you oscillate your tongue, you get what I call a siren lip roll. I don't know if it has an official name. I need to ask somebody who's been doing it a while. But using that sort of a, and then oscillating your tongue, you get, which is pretty handy in beats. I've used it in conjunction with inwards case. You would get something like, but you can even drop the mouth position lower and get something more like a sub bass. And if you're doing that inwards, it would sound like, which will shake subwoofers on mic if you do it live. You get less of a flap like you do with the regular inwards lip roll, but you get that reverberation and that low bass. So if I was doing that in a beat, the low inwards lip roll, or I think it's technically considered sub bass. I'd have to ask somebody on that too. But you get something like, something like that. So the inwards lip roll motion is super versatile, and there's tons of ways you can work around that sound when it comes to bass, and I really like it. I need to remind myself not to overuse it in all the different beats that I make, but that's a fun one, and it was definitely worth all the pain of learning how to do it correctly. But what we can do is move on to the throat basses, or throat bass. This is the one I talked about on the debut stream, and we'll see if I'm able to do it cleanly after talking for this long. I think the honey will help. But to recap how throat bass works, if you tighten your vocal cords in your throat, sort of higher up in the throat as opposed to lower, and force air through, you get a technique which is similar to a Tibetan and or Mongolian throat singing. So that's how you get the and this is with just an O shape on my mouth itself. But if I were to open it up, it'd sound like wow 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 wow. And you can go up, down in the register with it, something like wow 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 wow. And you have a range. My favorite sort of filter to put on throat bass is my lips super close together, barely open, to get more of a reverberating sound, and that's how you get the. So if we were to do some practice drills for throat bass, we could do just sustained notes or mix it in with the beat. I haven't quite decided which is better or worse in this particular case, but just doing something like Something like that would be good practice. What I'm doing there while I'm making the is I'm using my tongue to break up the bass and give it texture. So one thing I like to do is give it like a rapid 16th note or triplet texture when I'm doing it. So instead of a sustain, you're getting like a more choppy. I'm almost doing Darude Sandstorm. I will try and avoid doing that for everybody watching. But the texturing is handy for mixing up how you have the bass working in conjunction with the rest of your beats. And you can use the sort of staccato, I guess it would be, rapid tonguing to help you go up and down like you would on a note scale. So what I mean by that would be something like and what I'm also doing is I'm closing my lips to get an sound in between the texturing, which is how you're getting the. So it goes open, close mouth real quickly, and that changes up how the texturing works again. So that's how you're getting a. Something like that. And so throat bass, depending on how someone is introduced to beatbox sounds, again, everybody learns a different pace and they start with different sounds. I don't know anybody who started in the exact same place unless they were all in the same class with the same teacher. But I don't know anybody who started with the same core sets of focuses when it comes to learning. Everybody's different. The first vocal or throat-based bass I learned was throat bass. It's the one I've been doing the longest, and I feel like that's the one I can do the most consistently. The long-term goal, and you guys who are coming along with me on this journey are going to get to see it in real time. One of my long-term goals, or I guess more short-term, long-term would be mastery, but short-term is learning inward bass. Inward bass is one of the most popular types of basses in beatboxing, period. You can see it in almost every single major beatboxer's kit that they use to create their sounds. And so I'm going to explain what it is. I can't do it. So I'll say right now, full transparency, I can't do inwards bass. It's one I'm trying to learn and I'm actively practicing, but I can't do it. If you asked me to bust it out now, I wouldn't be able to do it. It is what it is. But inwards bass is the opposite of throat bass in that it, like the name sounds, is inward. You're pulling air in, and instead of closing off your vocal cords and pushing air out, you're tightening your vocal cords or you're positioning them in a way and you're pulling air through them. It's the reverse process. And as a result, the bass and reverberations for inward bass come from much lower and they hit different. They definitely sound different. It's a lot more rumbly, more heavy, and very useful for things like dubstep drops or heavy beats and bass sounds. A good beatboxer to look at from the pro side that sort of embodies inwards bass would be a guy named Vocoder. And I could put his name in chat here. In fact, I should be doing that more often for folks that are watching. But this dude, Vocoder, he's from the States. I think he's from the East Coast. And he's competed in all the major events. He's very, very skilled, and he does a lot of dubstep sounds. His inward bass is bananas. When you first learn it, it's a lot more growly and heavy. Again, I can't do it. I can't demonstrate it. But when you learn it at high levels, the ability to change up the pitch, texture, and everything else is really limitless potential. And if you want to see what mastery looks like, check out Vokoda's videos and his routines. The guy's nuts. He's very, very talented when it comes to that stuff, and just beatboxing in general. But the idea of inwards bass synergizes with a lot of other sounds in that once you learn how to create vocalized / bass sounds inwards, you can combine it with other things, including things like your inwards lip roll. Again, I can't do it, but if we were to take the and did an inwards bass on top of it, you'd get like a growling bass reverberation underneath the actual inward lip roll itself. So you have the two sounds combined, and it creates a whole new sound, which is, again, very cool and versatile to use. So, like I said, my plan is to learn inwards bass soon. As soon as I can do it reliably, I'm going to work inwards bass practice into these jam streams from the practice sessions, because it's probably my top sound I want to learn right now. And there's some other ones that I want to learn as well, but the one that takes a lot of conditioning and overall practice is definitely inward bass. And when you first learn it, your throat's obviously not used to generating sound that way, so it tends to wear people's voices out real quick, and you have to build up endurance and everything else. But once you get a handle on the technique and you get your throat and vocal cords conditioned to doing it, then it's a really powerful tool, and it works incredibly well in beats. So we will keep that as a long-term item to practice for the immediate future. But before we start going through some more practice stuff for bass, I did want to talk about the other one that we mentioned on the debut stream that's, I would consider not a variant, just more of a cousin to throat bass, and that would be chest bass. Chest bass is an outwards breathing bass sound, but it comes from lower in the throat and closer to the chest, as the name would suggest. And the way you do chest bass is a little bit different from throat in that you're opening up your throat and letting the air resonate further down in your vocal cords throat area. So the way I've heard people describe it, which I think is really a good way to teach people, would be if you just breathe out through your mouth and you try and breathe out as low in your throat as possible. So the example that I like is like when you're frustrated, or let's say as a kid, you have a bad day at school. This is the example Kindo used actually. And you go home and you're just fed up with everything, and you go, and you just sigh really loud out of your mouth, but you sort of drop where it's coming from in your throat. That's how you get the someone tells you, oh, go take out the trash. I think that's the example Kindo used. And you're just like, fine. That reverberation is the chest bass itself. And for most people, when they do it, it's probably very subtle. The more you practice it and you get used to pushing all the air out of your lungs and getting it to sort of reverberate in that spot, then it gets stronger and it gets louder, and it becomes something you can use more and more. And the most common thing that I've seen people do is what they call vocalized chest bass, where they add in their vocal cords through either humming or making just a melody noise in conjunction with the and that's how you get the it's a little bit difficult for me to do because my voice is kind of tired now. But the vocalized chest bass resonates lower than the regular throat bass. So the way I described it on the debut stream would be if your throat bass is up here with your, then your vocalized chest bass goes down further and goes, I'm going to attempt to try and work on some practice beats with that. But again, my voice is kind of tired. So it's a little bit difficult for me to get the sound out now. So if we were to try and practice, let's see, we have something like, it's not clean right now. Normally I'd be able to keep it low and then drop it lower and keep it in that lower register. But the main point of chest and vocalized chest bass that I could see is that it helps you get lower bass tones than throat bass. Throat bass seems to have sort of a mid to upper lower cutoff for how low you can go with your vocal cords before it starts to get difficult. But if you go into vocalized chest bass and you go lower, then it's easier to get that lower register of sounds. So that's why I said the common drill is to do from a high bass to low and get used to moving between the two real quickly so you can do it on demand. So I'll see what I can do here, but if it's not working, we have to put that off till one of the other practice streams. So if we start with throat bass up high, we have something like, and we drop, and we go, it's getting difficult to get that particular lower sound out. Normally I can do it pretty consistently, but I think my voice is tired. But that's okay. The point is to talk a little bit about it and explain the technique and where the sound comes from, and then I will have to kind of focus on practice patterns a little bit later. That's fine. It's not the sole focus of the stream today. So to sort of recap, we've gone through basic sounds, our drum kit, things like our kick, hi-hat, snares. We talked about technicality and putting those kit sounds together to create fast patterns to be used in between. And then we talked a little bit about bass. This is more of an intro to bass. I may have to devote future jam streams to specific bass practice, especially maybe more towards the beginning when my voice is fresh and not quite as worn out. But putting all that together gives sort of a glimpse into a beatboxer's toolkit. Again, the pros and folks that have been doing it for 10, 20 years have probably hundreds of sounds in their kit that they can use on the fly to put together beats and routines. So my goal here is to continue trying to build my arsenal of sounds while also learning new stuff and practicing, coming up with ways to practice. And if anyone following along on YouTube wants to learn or is curious about anything related to beatboxing, then these jam streams are going to be a way to sort of facilitate the discussion and hopefully be at least interesting. Again, if people want to learn in depth how to do a lot of this stuff, I can talk about the theory and concept and sort of explain things, but I will always point people to the dedicated teachers out in the beatbox community that have in-depth video tutorials, guides on how to learn some of the more complicated things. So that's sort of the goal here. And we'll just sort of see how it evolves. But before we sort of wrap up for the day today, I did want to spend some time brainstorming some ideas and some concepts for the BGM. And I think I could probably sit down for this. My feet are getting tired. I need to fix my camera. There we go. No, it's good. Feels good to sit down. It's been almost 2 hours on my feet. So I'm going to sort of take a stab at how I want to handle the brainstorming sessions for the BGM. And if we think back to the debut, because again, I haven't really used the BGM on anything I've streamed this week. I think next week I have a chill/chatting stream scheduled. So in that, I have to figure out what I want to talk about. I was thinking about devoting part of it to talking about the VTuber scene and a bit more about how I got into it. I talked about it a little bit before, but it might be interesting to do sort of a information exchange about who I got interested in first, how I felt in the rabbit hole, as it were, and then sort of talk to the folks on stream and chat about where they came from and maybe get recommendations or something else. But that will be the next chance to use any of the BGM stuff that we're working on. And I don't know if I'll have enough information to create a new track by then. We'll definitely be using the initial track that I created, the real kind of rough one. But if we remember back to what that sounded like, that's the one that has the basic set of kick, snare, PF, and throat bass. So that's the one that sounds like and then it loops. So I was thinking about some other ideas for tracks that are going to be different. I don't want to just do slight variations on the same BGM track, because that's not very interesting. And so one thing I was thinking about that I just happened to do on the debut stream is that sort of bossa nova-ish jazz beat that I did kind of randomly, and maybe build on that idea for the next BGM track that we do. And so that one sounds like and so that one is basic kick, hat, and a click. That's the... And I didn't talk about that sound at all, but that one is just tongue, back of tongue on the roof of the mouth, pulling down real quick. I think most people know how to do a click. It's a sound that usually people just learn or figure out how to do randomly throughout their lives. But when someone's like, hey, they do the finger guns, like, or if you, some families have parents that will do the tongue clicks at you, something like that. So this jazz-ish beat combines all those, and that's how you get the... I guess technically it's just kicks and clicks to begin with, but if we were to mix up some hi-hats in there, we might get something like, get a hat in between the kick and the first click. Something like that could work. What do you guys think? If we were to take that basic rhythm, as it were, and start figuring out ways to add to it and sort of flesh it out, what do you guys think would be a good way to do that? I'm thinking about like a melody bass line sort of underneath the beat itself, but if we're just talking about the rhythm, just the beat, just the. What would be some good ways to switch things up? I could do something like switch up the rhythm itself after a certain amount of measures. So let's see if we were to go. And add sort of a click, a series of clicks like a drum fill. That's where you get the. Yeah, this is not a 4/4. What is it? Is it a 3/4? I haven't been in music school in a really long time. It's 1, 2, and that's not 3/4. 1, 2. I don't know what time signature that is. I just know the beat itself because I've heard it used in other things. I'm pretty sure that rhythm itself is coming from the girl from Ipanema. Is it? It's not. Is it 2/3? I don't know. Someone who knows music better than me could probably tell me what the actual time signature is. But I think that's what's making the ability to sort of play around with the rhythm a little more challenging, which I think is fine. I'd much rather work with a sound and a series of sounds that's a little more unique, because then it'll make the BGM track stand out from the other ones. I'm just sort of trying to tap out what the signature is. Is it a 5 signature? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. That's the rhythm that we're going to work with. But let's see. So again, when we go back to the bass rhythm, let's do it in 4 measures, whatever the time signature is. So we got 4 of the. And how would we switch up the rhythm? Let's see. I can either keep the rhythm and then do sort of an introduction of a melody. So if we did, let's say, 4 measures of just the beat and then we add in some sort of melody, we could do something like. That might be a good way to tie off the end of the actual section. Just do an extended fill of clicks. So if you're doing end to end, it'd be. Oh, I see. I see, Edward. I don't know if it's necessarily odd. Again, I haven't been in a music class since a long time ago. So trying to use music notation probably isn't going to be wise for me because I'm going to look like a moron. But knowing that we have a rhythm to work with, I think it's going to be more of a trial and error exercise in seeing how we can add sections to our bass rhythm and then restructure things to get our end result. And I definitely want to keep a steady rhythm. I don't want to change the rhythm itself in the actual BGM track, because I think that might get a little distracting. So instead, doing things like adding in the melody and then adding in something like the extended click fill before it loops back again might not be a bad way to do it. Because just adding a two note bass line to the rhythm, I think was working all right. Just if we had no rhythm at all, just the So we have so three, then drop it down a little bit, lower three, and then it loops back around. I think that could work. So if we were to put it all together, let me see how to sort of sequence out what I'm saying in actual practice. If we start with no melody for 4 measures and go then that could be the entire loop right there. So far, I like the way that sounds. It's simple. Again, these BGM tracks they do not need to be super complicated, because if I'm sitting there doing like a talking or a chill stream, and then in the back you got something like I think it's going to get a little distracting for the people that are listening to have that competing in the background with whatever it is I'm saying. So keeping it simple, but also distinct enough that it's good ambient noise would be the goal. And the handy thing about the way I'm handling these streams is that I have the actual recorded footage. What I've done so far on the channel is, after I finish streaming, I delist the YouTube archive, and then I have a copy of the footage that OBS pulls down as soon as I'm done streaming, and then I pull that into my video editing software so that I can correct the sound if I need to boost the sound or lower it in spots, and if I need to trim out dead spots in the actual stream itself, like if I'm away for a couple minutes because I have to go to the bathroom and we're on a loading screen, unless people are really interested in just hearing the loading music, not necessary to keep that in the stream, so I'll condense that down. And if there's anything like the stream dropping or we have to pause for something else, then I can edit it there. But I'll have the footage of the stuff we talk about in the jam streams. So when I sit down and actually start recording the BGM and editing in audio software, there'll be a record of what we talked about. So that's good. One thing I will look at doing in the future, I don't have it enabled right now because I don't feel like it's super relevant, but eventually I'll have something on these streams that has the live chat in the actual broadcast, so that when I edit the archives and put it all up, since it won't be a live replay of the YouTube stream, people can see what other people are talking about in the chat. But right now the chat doesn't have a ton of activity, which is fine. But I intend to incorporate that in the future. But I think that's a decent base for creating the BGM, at least that particular variant. What do you think, Edward? If we did a combination of the rhythm and then a real simple melody and then the click fill as the sort of tie-in to the actual loop itself, Do you think the track needs anything else? Like, should we add in another section, or keep that as the main part of the looping BGM? To me, I think the easiest way to do it would be to keep each section simple, and then if we come up with a different set of ideas or a different variation, we can make that a different track altogether. There, in my mind, is no real limit to how many background music tracks I want on my stream. If we end up making 50 of them, then I can use a playlist of all of the songs and it'll cycle. I think that'd be great. We can see one of the things I want to... How about slowing it down a little bit? Okay. That's an interesting idea. So if we think back to our bass rhythm, the way I've been doing it was, again, I don't know what the time signature is. It's probably an irregular time signature, but if we slow it down a little bit, we might get something that's more... And then that's essentially a loop of the melody part twice with a fill in between, and then a different fill at the end that's going to circle all the way back for the track to start over from the beginning with the non, just the rhythm by itself. I don't know about you, but I think it actually sounds better slower. It's maybe, 20% slower, 30% slower, but it gives the rhythm a little more room to breathe and doesn't sound like it's quite so crammed together, in my opinion. So trying to think back, the original was... and we slow it down to... I think that's a good idea. I'm leaning more towards keeping the slower one. It also makes it easier for me to do the melody and the bass line on that when it's slower. It also makes it easier to play around with the click fill at the end. So if we're going... could even do more than one. I'm sort of tapping out on my desk here. I may load up my metronome next time so we can work in BPM as opposed to trying to eyeball it or by ear. But I do like the idea of a double loop on the melody and then maybe doing a run of the click fill on the first section and then the end doing a different one. So the first one might go... let's see. So we have two different fills, and then the second one I did would be what loops all the way back to the beginning of the track. Yeah, I think I like the way that sounds, Edward. What I can do when I get to work on actually editing and recording the BGM itself, because I'm not going to pull the audio out of this session. I think it'll be better if I sit down and actually record it using one of my other pieces of hardware for higher quality, and then that's when I'm going to mix and edit together. But the basic rough draft of the BGM is here in the footage, and I think that'll work. Now, I may decide to tweak things, but because we're doing this sort of as a collaborative process, I don't want to really alter too much of what we talk about here, especially as I get feedback from the folks on the chat. But the one thing I do want your feedback on would be what to call the BGM itself once it's done. I don't know how long it's going to take me to do that, and I think when I do, I'm going to put it probably as maybe I'll post it as its own video just with the song itself, but I'm definitely going to put it on Twitter. But the theme needs a name. So what do you think about a name for this sort of weird bossa nova, semi-jazzy BGM track we've created? As we start building out, the more people that tune into these, and we have more folks to sort of interact with and get feedback from, I could do something like put up a poll too. If we have a whole bunch of suggestions for what we're going to call the BGM track we make or something like that. But I think of the people that are tuned in now, I think it's just one for now. I'll have to think about it. If we don't come up with a name here, then maybe I will put a discussion post up on the YouTube channel with Super Bossa Nova. Okay. I may have to actually research if the rhythm that I'm talking about even comes from bossa nova, but that's what I think of whenever I hear it. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I will make a note. Need to get in the habit of writing stuff down anyway. We're going to call this BGM track 2. We'll call it Super Bossa Nova. All one word. In fact, I'm going to keep this track list handy so as we work on future things on stream, I'll have a running list of all the stuff that we've come up with along the way. I think that would be pretty handy. So good. And then we've got a pretty solid foundation for creating the next track. Again, I don't have a timeline on it, but my goal is to record and mix something in June. And then once it's ready, I'll put it up somewhere so that everyone can see it, and we'll incorporate that in the stream. But that being said, we are clocking in at a little more than 2 hours. We went through kind of a lot of Beatbox, sort of basic explanations of stuff like that. So I think I will wrap up the stream here. Before we jump off, are there any other questions from chat? Anything you wanted to talk about? Or the stuff that we covered here? I think I'll be able to condensed down this particular stream a little bit, but I'm more or less going to upload it with fixed audio if I need to in its entirety, just like the other ones. I actually have to do the gaming stream one next. I'm a little bit annoyed with how the audio mix came out on that one. It wasn't until later on in the stream that I realized that the video game music was much louder than my mic. So when I post that one, hopefully in the next couple days, you're not going to be able to hear me very well. But that's okay. I wanted people to be able to hear the music for the game, but in the future, I'm probably going to have the game volume down a little bit more so that it's clear when I'm talking and I don't get drowned out by the actual game I'm playing. And also, it's worth mentioning that I do have the stream schedule set for next week. I will be posting that probably before the end of the day today. It'll be up on Twitter, and maybe I can put a discussion post on the YouTube channel itself for people to see. I don't want to just fill up the discussion page of my channel with stream announcements. I feel like that would get kind of cluttered. But the next stream, according to... I'm going to need to fix the week of. Week of 5/31, the next one's going to be on Monday at 2:30 Pacific. I'll be doing another drawing stream. I haven't quite figured out what I want to focus on for that one. We could do sort of a continuation of the Homeworlder concept art stuff we did this week. I do want to talk about clothing and outfits, so that could be something we talk about. I've also got some other monster-related concept art that I want to work on as well. So we'll see what shakes out from there. But the days I have set for next week are Monday, Thursday, and Sunday. I will double check everything before I actually post it. Right now, 3 streams a week is pretty doable. I've toyed around with the idea of doing pop-up streams, just unscheduled, random streams for maybe an hour or so. The problem is I don't know if people are going to get enough advance notice to be able to see them and join them. So we'll see. I know I tend to reference Twitter a lot, but when it comes to keeping up with what I'm doing, if I end up doing something like impromptu pop-up streams, I'll be posting it there. And I guess if people are subscribed, they would see a notice there. So we'll see. But for now, I'm sticking with 3 days a week. I may up it to 4 depending. We'll see. But I guess with that said, we will go ahead and wrap up the first Beatbox Jam stream. It was definitely interesting trying to do a combination of explanation and practice. And maybe next time we can devote more time to BGM brainstorming as a sort of lead into the next session. I do want to sort of come up with a lo-fi hip-hop type of theme to use. So we'll see if we can brainstorm some stuff for that on the next session. But until then, the folks out there on chat, thanks again for tuning in. I'm glad you guys could hang out. I will see you guys soon and have a good evening.